Hi, I'm Murphy, and this is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, where I talk about books because I love to talk about books. I wish this was a I love books shirt, but it's not. It's actually a I love my hometown, which wherever that is. So today I want to talk about Shorty September and the first book that I finished. I was very excited to hear about Shorty September from the hosts, and the hosts are Bert at Pastory Time 2683 and Heather at Soggy Expat Book Nerd. And I'll put their handles down below in the description. But Shorty September is a booktube reading event that has 12 book prompts, and by shorty they mean short books, and they say that you can define what that is, but I chose mostly less than 200 page books, but a couple that are a little bit longer than that. So I chose 7 books. I love that Heather made a zine that you could use to keep track of the books. When I link to the introduction video below, that'll have a link to the zine. And one of the prompts was Elizabethan shorts. And so these would be like pantaloon kind of shorts, like you think of, you associate with William Shakespeare, but it's just an historical read, and so it's just a read from the past. That's how they defined it. And so I chose The Final Solution, A Story of Detection by Michael Chabon. And so that's what I want to talk about. I think the best way to describe what happens in this novella, it's about 144 pages long in the hardcover version. I think the best way to describe what's going on in this book is to describe the characters. And so first we start at the Panikers. The Panikers consist of Mr. Paniker, Mrs. Paniker, and Reggie. And Mr. Paniker is a vicar for the local Anglican church. In fact, I think they live next door to the church, very close to the church. And Mrs. Paniker runs a boarding house, and she's said to be able to put on a good table, to cook well. And I think that since this book is set during World War II and rationing was going on, that's a testament to the cooking that people had to do during this time. If you can set a good table, then you're pretty talented at taking the things that you can get through rationing and do something with them. And then Reggie, their son, is a young adult. I can't remember how old he is, but old enough to be on his own, but he still lives at home, and he's a ne'er-do-well. He is not the kind of son that they would have wanted. Mr. Paniker, by the way, is Asian. I believe he's an Indian. And he's also maybe not a very good vicar. All right. They have lodgers. They have 3 or 4 lodgers, depending on how you want to count. Mr. Shane and Mr. Parker are men who live in the boarding house. Mr. Shane is a new boarder, newish, and he paid well in advance, and Mr. Parker's been there a while, and he's studying architecture, local architecture. And then they also have a young boy, I believe he's 10 years old, and his name is Linus Steinman, and he's a Jewish refugee from Germany. And so this is set during World War II, so you can imagine how he was gotten out of Germany. He has a sponsor who checks in on him every once in a while. And then the 4th boarder, if you will, is Bruno. Bruno is a red-tailed African gray parrot. And Bruno is known for his German and Austrian songs and poetry, but he also occasionally just reads out a list of numbers in German. It seem to have no relationship to each other, and he just reads them out. And so the boarders and the other residents of the Paniker house always are speculating, what do these numbers mean? Maybe it's a secret code. Maybe he, hung around with spies or something. So they're always speculating on this. So those are the residents of the Paniker household. The story begins when Linus and Bruno are walking along the railroad, and an old man who's unnamed throughout the story, he's just called the old man. An old man is sitting reading his bee journal, because he keeps bees, and he sees them and realizes when Linus unzips his fly and starts to relieve himself on the rails, that since the rails are electrified, he might kill himself. And so he gets out of the house as fast as his 89-year-old body will let him, and he yells at the boy, tries to get their attention. The boy zips up and eventually comes over, and we find out that Linus doesn't speak. In fact, he hasn't spoken since he was brought over from Germany. And so it's not even known if he can speak. And so Bruno, the bird, is kind of his spokesbird. And so the old man gets their attention. They come over. He feels like he's, saved this boy's life. He figures out, since the bird is just listing numbers in German, that the boy must be German as well. And so in his broken German, he tries to speak to him to find out who he is. And he offers him some old candy that he found in a cabinet. And so he gets to know as much as he can from a mute boy and a bird who's just spouting numbers, what he can about this boy. The boy actually has a notebook and a pencil, and he will write notes. But he doesn't write very well. In fact, he probably has dyslexia. He's always doing backwards writing and things like that. So, we've met the main characters, at least from the beginning of the book, and Linus and the old man have met. Linus goes home. The next day, there's a murder, and the bird is missing. Linus is inconsolable because the bird's missing. We meet two detectives from the local constabulary, Detective Inspector Bellows and Constable Quint. And they show up at the old man's place because they can't figure out anything about this murder. They're there to get the old man's help, because it turns out that the old man used to work with Inspector Bellows' grandfather, who we don't know who that is. They never name him. But he worked with his grandfather, and the old man, was a brilliant detective. So we're getting a lot of clues about who this old man is, even though he's never named for us. He lives on the Sussex Downs. He's 89 years old in early 1940s. He was a detective. He keeps bees. He smokes a pipe. And so from those clues and other things, we're led to believe that this old man is Sherlock Holmes, and that Detective Inspector Bellows' grandfather was Lestrade. That's what we're led to believe. We're never told this explicitly, And I think that if you read the book and didn't know that, you would still find it enjoyable, but looking for these clues makes it a little more interesting. So the detectives, the police, wonder if the old man has lost his mental abilities, but they show up. He identifies them without them telling who he is. He says that the Detective Inspector Bellows is the grandson of a man he used to work with, and he also tells them why they're there, which he knows for some reason. We actually know why he knows, but they don't know that. They think that this is just miraculous. And so he decides to help them. But he doesn't help them because he wants to find the murderer. He helps them because he feels an attraction to this boy, like there's some connection there, and he wants to help to find the bird. And he says that if they happen to find the murderer along the way, that's just a coincidence. And so that's the setup. There are 3 mysteries here. Who killed the person who died and why? Where's the bird? And what are the numbers that the bird is spouting? So this is a good read. I was expecting maybe a little more from Chabon, but it's probably because it was such a short book that I didn't get more. His characters had that combination of believability and quirkiness and just a little different that you'd expect from Chabon. The story was interesting, had a lot of connections to pop culture, had a lot of connections to pop culture at the time, had connections to the history and what was happening in the world, like his books do. The writing was a little uneven. There were scenes that I thought were really well developed. For instance, there's a dinner scene at the boarding house that we learn a lot about who the characters are and their relationships to each other through this well-developed scene. There's another good scene where Mr. Paniker and the old man meet up later, and we learn a lot in that scene as well, and so that is well developed. But there were other scenes that I really wanted more from, and for instance, even the denouement, that when we find out everything that we were hoping to find out, really needed, it just went like that and really needed some more development. But it was a 144-page book, so a novella that was originally published in a magazine. And so it's not unexpected that there would be places where you didn't get as much as you wanted, but I did think it was a little uneven, that you got a lot in some places and not in others. But it was still a good read. I think well worth it if you're a Sherlock Holmes buff, if you like things about how people lived in England during World War II, all those sorts of things. This is a good book. So that's all I have for this video. I am working on a lot of the other books from Shorty September, my reading list. I'm not going to go over what that reading list is now, but as is my way, have of the 12 books, I've dived into 7 of them already, and I just finished one today, so I'll make a video about that as well. And I'm really enjoying Shorty September, and thanks to Bert and Heather for putting it together. And without even telling you what the weather is, I'm going to say goodbye because I hear my partner coming in. Take care. I was very excited